Well, you're watching the Daily Report. It is 50 minutes past the hour. Thank you so much for staying with us. Time for that important conversation. I did inform you earlier on redefining responsibility towards circularity. This, in essence, is matters, recycling and reducing, or rather our responsibility towards circularity and designing packaging materials that are to be recyclable and to help Kenya realize a circular economy. My two guests are already here. The gentleman I told you about on my right is James Odongo. He is the Chief Administrative Officer at KEPRO, and James currently holds the position of Chief Administrative Officer at the Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization, that is KEPRO, and prior to his role he served as the CEO of the Nairobi chapter of the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and he's an alumnus of the University of Nairobi and also currently pursuing an MSc in Urban Management from the same institution, that is the University of Nairobi. On my left is Klaus Len Christensen. I got that right? He's the DI East Africa Manager, and he has varied experience within both public and private sector and has worked on 3 continents, that is Europe, North America and Africa. And since 2021, East Africa Manager for one of the largest employer and business member organizations in Europe, the Confederation of Danish Industry, DI. And before that, Klaus, of course, was heading DI's office in New York between 2015 and 2020 with a focus on clean tech trade between the US and Denmark, and he has also worked with the British Embassy and the Spanish Embassy in Copenhagen, Denmark, respectively. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the program. Quite, an important conversation to have right here in the country, especially on matters recycling. But at this point, I mean, Kenyans and the viewers have been curious to find out what exactly it is that you do. And I think I'll begin with you, James. What exactly it is that you do, in your organization?
Okay, thank you, Maringa. And maybe just to set context for today's conversation, and what KEPRO fundamentally does. I'll take you back to 2017 when we had the ban of the single-use plastic bags in Kenya, and that set the conversation for management of other material fractions that cause pollution to the environment, and more particularly the plastic menace that we had during that period of time. But then the idea was, and more fundamentally for the private sector, was even if you'd want to ban packaging or certain material fractions from polluting the environment, until when will you, you can't ban products into perpetuity. So the idea was we'd want to manage the products that we'd want to call stubborn material as far as environmental conservation is concerned. And so between 2017 through to 2019, there was a conversation, of course, supported by the Confederation of Danish Industries, largely private sector driven. The Confederation of Danish Industry coming together with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers and other private sector players. They came together and gave a solution to the government that we'd rather manage these material fractions that you're talking about banning as opposed to banning, because of course they're also the environmental, beyond the environmental consequences, the economic consequences might also be challenging. So what better way would we be able to ensure that we are balancing the environmental impact as well as the beneficial aspects of the economy? So between 2017 and 2019, through, of course, deliberations and continuous engagement with the various actors, there was something we're calling the Kenya Plastic Action Plan. So, of course, through the support of the Danish industries. And that paved the way for the Sustainable Waste Management Act. So the Kenya Plastic Action Plan was introducing what we are calling the Extended Producer Responsibility
we will get
policy
to
approach.
And we'll get to the details of that. But Glenn, Klaus Len, thank you so much for joining us. Your organization is also one that is keen on these issues, matters at heart. What exactly would you say would be at the heart of your organization?
I think we've been doing development programs in Africa for 20 years now, and one of the big topics for us is sustainability. For us as a nation, we've been on this path since the 70s, basically, where we said no to nuclear power and adopted wind. So for us, even at the consumers and the citizens, sustainability is really becoming a creed, right? So we feel by now we've got a lot of knowledge to offer to African partners such as KM and KEPRO and other good partners in the region.
And how is the reception of that?
think it's very good. I think there's a brand around Denmark as a global front runner. So people, they see, okay, they got something to offer. It's valuable, and what we do are knowledge partnerships. So we transfer knowledge to local partners. In this case, it's been a lot about the circularity and waste management. How can you really design products from the get-go so they get a second life and a third life? You don't design for this being wasted right after you empty the juice can, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And James, I see you're wearing the SDG goals lapel pin.
Yes.
And it's sort of also is in line with the Sustainable Waste Management Act of 2022, which you spoke about in passing.
Yes.
But you can talk to us about what it basically depicts.
Okay. And that essentially speaks to what we do as KEPRO, where we are trying to support Kenya's realization of a circular economy. And you have to go through the process of coming from a linear economy through to a recycling economy before you realize the true north, which is a circular economy. So the Sustainable Waste Management Act under Section 13, and more particularly 13.1 and 13.2, is introducing what we are calling the extended producer responsibility policy approach and making it mandatory for all producers introducing any product into the Kenyan market to comply with the EPR obligations. So EPR in itself, you can comply either as an individual entity or through a compliance scheme, a collective compliance scheme such as the Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility, where we of course now support producers to comply with the law as far as the EPR requirements are concerned.
Okay.
Yes.
And those are important points that you raised. And again, back to you, Klaus, the EPR, that is the Extended Producer Responsibility, is one, of course, that the EU has been keen about. And talk to us about what Kenya can borrow, especially from the EU context in regarding EPR.
I mean, in a nutshell, EPR is about shifting the responsibility for waste management to the producers. So the producers have to take that responsibility upon them to control their waste and track where it's going, right? So it doesn't end up in landfills or waterways. And I think in the EU, so the EU is basically an internal market of 27 countries. So now we have directives for waste management for all manufacturers and producers in the union. There are variations from country to country, but what it does is that you cannot, as a manufacturer, not track, let's say, your PET bottles. So in Denmark, we introduced a take-back system. So now you can drink your Coca-Cola bottle, return it to the store, and you get some M-Pesa in return. And that's a good incentive for the consumer. So we actually had, I think, 90% of rate of people returning used PET bottles to the supermarket, for example. So that's one of the initiatives we introduced maybe 15 years ago.
And yesterday, I attended a briefing by the Nordic Council of Ministers regarding the INC, that is the summit that is going on, this week. And he mentioned something, regarding something basic such as, earbuds, that the ones that have the cotton at the end, in between that stick is recyclable nowadays in Europe. Do you think that as Africa, as Kenya specifically, we are headed to a place where not only are we discussing the plastic bags, but also, adopting such technologies?
And I think it's a lot about putting value on the waste. So that the expression in Kenya, Taka ni mali, right? That the minute we start saying there's a value in this waste, there's also a job creation potential. If it gets collected, recycled in a proper way. So a lot of what we're doing with KEPRO now is also reaching all the CBOs of Kenya, so we can start the awareness and education of the youth, so we can transform them from informal waste pickers that basically don't earn anything into formal workers with a contract where they can get paid maybe through the M-Pesa system in the future.
James, looking at the country, our GDP, of course, and how our economy has been behaving, it's not been very favorable to Kenyans. And even as we speak about matters, sustainable waste management practices, some see it as too much jargon. They see it as, too much work. How then can Kenya enhance public awareness to say then, fine, we are in this situation as Kenya, but again, these, waste management, the sustainable waste management practices are issues and things that we should adopt?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid question, and we understand, of course, in the Kenyan context, you're coming from quite a lower platform as far as awareness and issues of behavior change are concerned. And so I think the idea is requiring that all particular stakeholders coming together. And of course, now you're looking at even the platform we'll be having tomorrow, where we are bringing all stakeholders just to try and create a common platform as far as conversations on sustainable waste management is concerned. And of course, you also need to understand that while we still need to create awareness, there's also quite a growing population within our country that is very woke to the reality that poor disposal of waste is contributing directly to the issues of climate change.
Yes.
And of course, also speaking to other fundamental issues that are being discussed during the INC. So in terms of awareness, it's going to take quite a lot in terms of what is required and instigate behavior change. But the immediate strategy that is going to be taken, and we are encouraging, of course, working with government, is that all stakeholders come together, speaking with one common voice, that there is need for proper disposal of waste. And of course, now we also have the backing of the law. Right from the household level, now the law requires that you have to separate your waste. And so despite the aspect of it being an individual effort, the law is also now coming into place and ensuring that you now, at household level, you have to first properly dispose of your waste, and then there's a second requirement to it that you segregate your waste to ensure that you're supporting the recycling ecosystem in the country.
And absolutely, and one of the questions and concerns I saw is, how then do Kenyans sustainably say, separating of waste? I mean, by the time you're telling someone to separate their waste, is it even affordable to buy these bins to be able to separate that waste? And that's a conversation that we'll be picking up. But right now, we want to take a short break. When we come back, we still continue this conversation on redefining responsibility towards circularity. Remember, we are in this world and it is ours to take care of. You're watching the Daily Report. We are back in a few minutes.
The news that matters the most is the one that hits close to home. When disasters strike, we are there to inform you. When the bullets are flying, we tell you who's shooting and why. Reporting on your victories, your health, your money, your security, your past, present, and future. We are interested in telling the stories of creativity, hard work, and resilience that you are known for. That is our job. This is my job. My name is Victor Moyakane, and it's my honor to bring you this news this way every Thursday night on the Home of Untold Stories.
Katika majengo haya, hapa ndipo sheria zinapotungwa na zinapopakuliwa. Nitakuletea viongozi mbalimbali, mirengo mbalimbali, wote kwa pamoja wakipika na kupakua. Tutawapa nafasi kuweza kuangazia changamoto na mafanikio ya ugatuzi katika ukumbi wa siasa kila siku ya Jumanne kuanzia saa 1 kamili na kuendelea.
Toka eneo hili la Naivasha kwenye kaunti 032, gatuzi la Nakuru.
Kutoka kaunti ya Elgeyo Marakwet, kaunti 028.
Nikiripotia runinga ya TV47 kutoka kaunti ya Wajir.
Nikiripotia TV47 kutoka kaunti ya Turukana. Kwa matukio yote yanayojiri katika kaunti hii 012.
Kutoka kaunti nambari 1, kaunti ya Mombasa.
Nikiripotia TV47 kutoka kaunti ya Lamu.
Nikiripotia TV47 kutoka Kisii County.
Nikiripotia TV47 kutoka kaunti ya Machakos.
Kutoka kaunti hii ya Trans Nzoia.
Kaunti 038.
Kutoka gatuzi nambari 029, kaunti ya Nandi, chemichemi ya mabingwa.
Nikiripotia TV47 kutoka kaunti ya Kakamega.
Itakuwa nikiripotia runinga ya TV47 kutoka kaunti ya Bungoma.
Jina langu ni Paula Munio.
Willy Dennis Jiru.
Fabian Kibet.
Mimi ni Hashim Jimal.
Mimi ni Kitio Mika Masai.
John Javakiania.
Jina langu ni Abdulaziz Nameka.
Mimi ni Kombo Alfayo.
Jina langu ni Nicholas Mbai.
Isaac Famba.
Mimi ni Wanji Sosti.
Jina langu ni Arnold Adidi.
Jina langu ni Chris Bet.
Jina langu ni Violet Auma.
Na TV47 inapotamba, mimi Sheila Chelangat nitakuwa nikiripotia maswala yanayokuhusu wewe kila kuchao. Every Thursday 7:30 p.m. unapata nafasi kufahamu viongozi mbalimbali kutoka humu nchini, kuanzia wabunge.
Through Changa, we could get money to pay our rent,
Thank you so much for watching the Daily Report right here on TV47. I'm still with my guests, Klaus Len Christensen, he's the manager of DI East Africa, as well as James Odongo, Chief Administrative Officer at KEPRO. Gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. And in case you're wondering, we're not speaking jargon tonight. Basically, today we're talking about sustainability and how to recycle materials from household level to national level. We invite you, of course, to join the conversation online. I'm already seeing your questions and your feedback. Please, if you're using our SMS portal, start with your name and where you're watching us from, and your feedback, your question, or your review about the show. Before into the break, Klaus, James was talking about the separation of waste and such, ideas that, as a country and in our societies that Kenyans at a personal level need to emulate. I wonder what is the future of packaging, because in Europe we've seen what is happening over there, but what are some of the packaging trends that we've seen in the EU in this context of speaking on matter sustainability, and what can we borrow?
I think we're moving towards a lot of nature-based products. Okay. So products that can be degraded and used for compost, for example. Bamboo is a good example for food trays, for example. So I think we'll see, not that we'll always have plastic, which is still a good product if it's handled in the right way. But we're seeing more and more nature-based products come in as substitutes, which is good to see. Yeah.
When you look even at the industry of plastics, starting all the way 1907 when the innovations were made, trillions of dollars have been made out of the plastic industry. And when we start talking about and management, sustainability in this 21st century, do you foresee that perhaps at some point we will get to an area where we say, fine, we are almost halfway towards what we want to achieve?
In this country?
In this country.
In general?
In this country and also globally.
Okay. I mean, we have the SDGs for a reason, the Sustainable Development Goals. Right now we know we're not going to make these targets by 2030, but it sets a direction and it creates a vision. And I think that's what we need as a society. We need a vision where the consumers and the youth are getting educated according to a green vision in this case. So I don't think we'll ever achieve 100%.
Okay.
But it's a moving target, right?
It's working.
But if you as a country set a vision and a direction, because we're talking about awareness. This is fairly new concepts in Kenya. So that's why you're working with KEPRO a lot around this, the youth engagement, bringing it into primary schools. Could this be part of a curriculum for the primary schools? We've already done a few in Nairobi this year, because those are the future consumers that will run the show. They will say yes or no to a given product based on, is it sustainable? Can you trace its origin, etc.
Absolutely. And great insight over there. James, there is this whole conversation on extended producer responsibility, the PEPR, and it is pretty much goes down to the producers of these materials.
Yes.
And it's been quite heated over the years. Do you think the legal frameworks that exist, if any, Kenyans are not pretty much conversant with them to even begin with, the producers specifically?
Okay, so I do want to respond in two ways.
Yes.
One is, it's a case of the act or the law coming into place very recently. So you are aware that the Sustainable Waste Management Act was assented into law in 2022. It might be a case of we've not adequately conveyed the information to all other actors and relevant entities. But then there's also another crop of producers or relevant stakeholders who've, quote unquote, deliberately chosen to ignore the information and waiting for the authorities to use the stick as far as enforcement is concerned.
Yeah.
So it's as I've said, it's really a two-way conversation.
How are you making it, palatable, and is there a word out there for general knowledge, especially for Kenyans?
Yes, by and large. And so when NEMA put out the notice in terms of moving towards the enforcement and compliance of EPR, one of the conditions we gave to NEMA, and of course as private sector, was that we're introducing what we are calling the assisted compliance, where NEMA is not moving directly into direct enforcement, but supporting producers and bringing them on board to be able to understand what is required of them as far as EPR is concerned, and ensuring that everybody is aware of their responsibilities before we move to the actual enforcement, where you're imposing fines or prosecuting individuals as far as the regulatory provisions are concerned. So by and large, I think there will be continuous engagement. In the initial phase that NEMA has shared, you're looking at between 6 months to 1 year of assisted compliance, just trying to bring on board producers, helping them understand that what is this whole EPR conversation about. After they've understood, now they either institute individual EPR compliance schemes or join collective EPR compliance schemes such as KEPRO, and then from there is when we move towards the next phase of enforcement and ensuring full compliance. Yes.
Klaus, you mentioned earlier on incorporation of these behaviors and learning in schools, especially for basic learning. Does that also encompass collaborations between government, private sector, NGOs and communities to be able to improve waste management and recycling efforts in Kenya?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about this public-private partnership approach, right? And you can always discuss where is it push or pull? Is it the government pushing or is it the private sector pulling, right? So that you need to strike this balance, right? So you can say the youth are both the consumers and they're also the future employees, right? So they have to be a part as a key ingredient in this. So that's why we're trying to, the advocacy we're trying to do together is targeting, yes, NEMA, they're the authority, but the private sector are the producers. At the same time, you need the youth because they're the future employees and consumers. So you need different language for different groups. So that's sort of also why how we are messaging to the different groups. It depends on who we're targeting. So when we do a curriculum for primary school kids, it's quite different than the conversation we're having tonight, where it's much more about what is plastic and stuff like that, right?
We have seen what public-private partnerships have done before. Is it coming with gusto? Is it coming with oomph on matter sustainability and sustainable waste strategies?
Because we're learning that this cannot be done by government only, for example, because there's a financing gap. And that's why the private sector comes in to cover that gap, right? So that's why it becomes, the parties have to listen to each other. It has to be a bipartite discussion. I mean, we had the African Climate Summit in Nairobi a month ago or something, and the biggest topic by far was financing. And if we had to do a green transition, financing will always be the main problem, challenge, but also solution, right? And for that, you need the private sector also in the mix.
Sure.
Absolutely. Close. And, James, earlier, when these conversations are held, we know very well, Nairobi is the most developed city in the country. And most of these solutions, when they are talked about, most of these problems, when you talk about them, most industries are in Nairobi. When you talk about solutions, Kenyans could think, this is more of a Nairobi problem. But this also extends so far in reaching other areas of the country. Do you think they are well informed? How is that conversation and discourse happening outside Nairobi?
Okay. So we've, of course, throughout between 2022 and just also give you a brief, is that KEPRO has been in existence between 2021 to date. And yes, the predominant focus was in Nairobi. But now, through our partnership with other partners, of course, more particularly DI, we are moving outside Nairobi. Understandably, because first, initially, KEPRO was working within a voluntary ecosystem. And we could only stretch our mandate to the breadth and width within which our finances would be able to support. But now, with the law coming into place and us getting a bit more support, I think for next year, for instance, we are supposed to be covering all the 47 counties and just trying to cascade down the information to the granular levels. And beyond that, I think we've also now been targeting specific areas just to try and focus our efforts to the rural areas. I think this year we are very particular on trying to increase our efforts in Kisii County and Mombasa County. Just also demystify the conversation on waste being a Nairobi problem. If you go to Kisii, in 2022, they had their official dump site being shut down and they had to get a solution. So that really necessitated us going there and trying to curate a solution for them. But in terms of information sharing and awareness creation, I think it will be, and more particularly emphasizing the role of the citizen, because as interesting as it may sound, we've worked with recyclers, and one of the challenges is the volumes. So you'd be surprised that if you have a problem of volumes for recycling, but we have litter all over, it shows that there's somebody who needs to take individual responsibility to support this recycling ecosystem. And you're not only contributing to a cleaner environment, but also contributing towards creation of jobs, supporting development of new businesses and the likes. So for us, it's demystifying and trying to understand that waste goes beyond the waste pickers. It's an individual mandate, you as an individual citizen, but you're also not only contributing to a clean and healthy environment, but supporting a whole ecosystem as far as creation of jobs is concerned, and providing us a source of livelihood for quite a number of citizens in the country.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean, great points as you talk about there. Klaus, on your end, would you speak perhaps to some of the public-private partnerships and, perhaps even speak to their successes that you've, been able to undertake so far?
I mean, we work now for close to 20 years with the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, which is, they represent about 2,000 manufacturing companies in Kenya. And an example can be from the sugar sector, which in the past has been struggling a lot in Kenya. There was a lot of political interference. So some years ago, we approached CAM, and they said, we have a problem in the sugar sector. Let's try with a public-private approach to solve this, because we needed to revive the private sector in the sugar sector, basically. So we came up with a national action plan, a bit like we did for plastics. So you can see a pattern here, right? It works to have a national action plan to get the parties together, all the stakeholders. So we often follow that model. We do a bipartite, or we get public-private parties together and have a conversation. That's where it starts. And then you can start planning together. And so it's often the same model we apply. So I think, the sugar case was a good one for us, and also it worked. We revived the sugar sector in Kenya. And so, yeah.
Do you think that, there will be more successes in the PPPs that will come, in the future?
Yeah, because of the financing gap. It's that simple. The government cannot afford to do this on their own. So that's why in a few weeks we'll have the Global Climate Conference in Dubai, right? And the big topic, no doubt, again, will be about financing for climate change and green transition.
And financing is really at the center of this conversation of sustainability. And do you think the EPR system offers, it of course offers great potential to channel funds to inform waste collectors as well as traders? And the PROs suggest that they will provide subsidies to waste pickers and traders.
Yes.
How is this going to happen in practice?
Okay. And sort of building as to the successes of PPP models.
Yeah.
For KEPRO, since 2021 to date, we pumped in over 100 million into the waste ecosystem, understandably within a voluntary ecosystem. So that should tell you what the impact would be within a mandatory ecosystem. And so how this is going to work within the informal settlement, realizing that Kenya's waste ecosystem is largely informal, is that we are looking at now moving from what we are, or rather just a phrase has been coined, the just transition or a green transition, where we are moving towards more formalized jobs, still maintaining our commitment to a clean and healthy environment. And so to achieve this and ensure that the money gets to the right people, we have partnered, of course, through the support of DI to develop a waste collectors toolkit, which will be essentially a toolkit to support the informal waste collectors and other actors within the waste ecosystem to be able to formalize their businesses. So within the toolkit, you're getting information on how to register cooperative society, essentially mapping out the business case within the waste ecosystem for informal waste actors. And so further, we would also be really giving them direct support to ensure that they are scaling up their businesses. And so beyond just the support from the subsidy program, we also be capacity building them from a knowledge point of view. So you're looking at business case, data documentation and record keeping. You're also looking at financial literacy to ensure that you're not only just collecting waste and going home, but you're actually handling it as a business so that you are you can actually be recognized as a formal business, even if you look at the financial institutions and the like. So, so for us, there will be the direct support in terms of subsidies for formalized groups, but even for the informal groups, we'll still be supporting them from donation in the form of PPEs and knowledge sharing, capacity building them to be able to look at the benefits of moving towards a formalized approach.
Yeah, I'm seeing Gladys Ekuru on X, formerly Twitter, saying, thank you so much, Gladys, for your feedback. She says, Kepro, kindly share the link so that you can join the virtual training. Perhaps you'll be able to share that link.
Yes, yes, we can be able to share. I think the same, I think she's referring to the conference tomorrow.
Yes, yes.
Yes, the conference will be shared. We'll also be live streaming on our social media platforms, looking at YouTube and as well as Facebook.
Okay,
yes,
absolutely. Klaus, when you look at the PPPs and the transition towards circular economy in Kenya, that is pretty much recycling and waste management, it is the technology is at the heart of it all. And learning from the EU, how will technology support Kenya's transition? Because whereas we've seen the efforts by the government, to encourage innovations, digital literacy, how will innovations and rather technology assist Kenya in achieving and at least getting to half of where Europe is?
I think there's a lot of automation and digitization in this. So we are dealing with a lot of data. I mean, they're onboarding so many companies right now in Kepro, and they have to be responsible for managing that data towards the Environmental Authority of Kenya. So a lot of it is about data solutions and technology coming from Europe. Because without that digital infrastructure, you cannot build a transparent system to manage all this. And then also maybe the design aspects, and you can argue is that technology, but really designing a product, we think of it as you have to start at the design phase. Design it to get taken apart so it can be used in a second life cycle, for example. So for us, there's a lot of creative design thinking, the way we've done our waste management system. So we create like very innovative products that can be easily taken apart and they don't have too many different kinds of plastic, for example. We try to keep it simple also. So maybe you've heard the phrase Scandinavian minimalism. We try to keep it rather simple so we don't overcomplicate the products. So I'd say design and then data and digitization are two key elements.
Absolutely. James, as we enter the home stretch of this conversation, I want you to speak to the conference tomorrow and perhaps some of the preliminary objectives you would like to see, short term as well as long term.
So of course, the conversation tomorrow is quite targeted. So Kenya has emerged quite strongly as a critical champion in terms of implementation of EPR. Today, the president mentioned that they are moving, of course, regionally, we are the front runners in terms of implementation of the extended producer responsibility. And so we saw it needful to sort of also give a platform for peer-to-peer exchange. So we'll be bringing in delegates from across the region, Rwanda, Tanzania, as well as Uganda, just to be able to also understand their experiences and see what we can also borrow from them. And so beyond that, we also want to demystify, or rather document the challenges that are there as far as, or rather both the challenges and opportunities as far as the transition towards implementation of mandatory EPR is concerned. And then in terms of the preliminary objectives moving forward, you're looking at us, of course, encouraging members of the public, more of a call to action to us to take a lead role in terms of transition towards a circular economy. So of course, at very minute levels, at very granular levels, encouraging people to first properly dispose of your waste, even before we go to the conversation on segregation of waste at source. Ensure that you're putting your waste in the bin. So that would be the main clarion call for tomorrow. But broadly and by and large is trying to exchange ideas from the different countries and see how we can improve our waste ecosystem in Kenya.
And brilliant. What do you think that DI East Africa would be able to contribute to the conversation tomorrow and of course to what he's speaking about?
A lot of the best practice sharing we'll be doing from the European side, right? And also just to be there to re-emphasize this idea of partnerships. That's why we're bringing in as public sector, private sector, there's CBOs tomorrow, because we need those stakeholders around the table to make this happen.
Yes.
And do you think, do you foresee perhaps successes, or do you see any successes as well as challenges post tomorrow?
There will always be challenges. But I think the fact that since November 1st, NEMA is now enforcing the Sustainable Waste Management Act will create a lot of tension in the country, but also create the necessary path forward for sustainable waste management.
Okay, brilliant. And James, let's get to the closing remarks and what you'd like to see. Speak to Kenyans. You can use that camera over there. Speak to Kenyans what you'd like to see, and what you'd like the whole embracing of sustainability, so that it doesn't look like jargon. That it doesn't look like we are speaking about issues that do not concern us. Because at the end of the day, until we start, back then we used to be told of the ozone layer. That conversation has progressed over time, over the decades. Perhaps break it down to Kenyans to be able to see, well, then this is a conversation that I want to be part of.
Yes. So I think mine would be more of a call to action to all Kenyans. Of course, first understand, and I think somebody today said that you don't need to go to school to understand that climate change is real. And so for me, it's a call to action to all Kenyan citizens and beyond Kenya. Take it upon yourself to first ensure you are properly disposing of your waste. Then understand that, take it to a second notch. If you're already disposing of your waste, segregate your waste at source. At the very basic level, try and segregate your dry waste, separate from your wet waste. When I talk about dry waste, I'm talking about a bottle of water, a plastic bottle for that matter. And wet waste would be food waste and the likes. So those two, you are sort of supporting the waste ecosystem as far as recycling is concerned. And then, of course, make it a clarion call for you and members of the community to try and demystify the narrative on waste. So we continuously, and in Kenya, we continuously say, you see trash, I see cash. So see trash as cash. I think with the EPR, you'll be seeing a lot more cash in the waste ecosystem. And at some point, you'll probably not be putting out your waste to be collected. You'll be taking it out for the recyclers and get some incentive back.
When you mention cash, of course, Kenyans will start paying attention.
Exactly.
Trash, you see cash. Klaus, you get the final word.
Thank you. Well, I'd say tomorrow is really about the partnership approach we've been using all along, right? And I think it's also about tomorrow we're celebrating that Kenya, like James is saying, has been the front runner. Kenya is a regional front runner in sustainable waste management. So it's also about saying this to Kenya, they should be proud to be a front runner in the region. And now we have to go mainstream. So let's break it down. Get it down to the youth, get it into the schools, be part of curricula. That's what we'll be working on next year with KEPRO.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the program. I've been speaking to Klaus Len Christensen, he's the manager of DI East Africa, as well as James Odongo, Chief Administrative Officer at KEPRO. Thank you so much for joining us and for your feedback. We are grateful. The conversation, of course, continues online. You will be able to see KEPRO's activity as well as DI East Africa's activity, their social media handles for more details of that conference that begins tomorrow. My name is George Maringa, thanking you so much on behalf of the entire team, led by Nick Mavindi, the producer, the director, and the entire crew that goes behind the scenes to ensure that this production, the bulletin, is